So today I want to look at my favorite piece of software for creating black and white images from my color digital files, and that's Nick, now DxO's Silver Efex Pro 3. Um, as some of you probably know, DxO took over the Nick plugins for Photoshop a while back, and have done some upgrades and are continuing that line, which is really great to see. And I've been using the new Silver Efex Pro 3, and I really love it. And it's just, I can get my images most of the way there in Lightroom, but I really use Silver Efex Pro just to put the finishing touches on them, basically. And it's really, like I said, it's hands down my favorite software for black and white images. So I wanted to take a look at how I do that in Silver Efex Pro 3. And let's dive in. Let's take a look. All right, I've got some images here of Garden of the Gods that I shot earlier this winter, and you can see I've already got one here that I created in Silver Efex Pro. I've done adjustments in Lightroom, and then here's what I created in Silver Efex Pro. So you can just see the amazing luminosity you can get out of the snow, and just the incredible feel of the image you're able to create. So I want to show you how I went from this to this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and open this in Silver Efex Pro. So I just right click on the image and go to edit in, and there's the plugins right there. I've already got the Nick collection set up as plugins for Lightroom. So I'm going to scroll down to Silver Efex Pro 3. I'm going to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. That way the adjustments that I've already done to tonality and contrast in Lightroom will be carried over into Silver Efex. I'm going to leave it as a TIFF file. It defaults to sRGB. I'm going to open it up as an Adobe RGB, 16-bit depth, resolution 240. I'm going to also do a compressed file just to save disk space a bit. And then I hit edit. So one of the nice things about editing the image as a TIFF file in Silver Efex Pro is that you can go back in and readjust the edits later. So it's a non-destructive editing, which is really nice. You'll see here as the image is opened in Silver Efex, that checkbox is checked down here in non-destructive edits. So when you choose TIFF file, that allows for that. I always make sure and have that checked. The only caveat is the history panel does reset after you save the image. So be aware of that. It's not like Lightroom where that history file is always there with that image. That history file does go away. But the settings and all these sliders will be there the next time, and I can go in and adjust those. So just looking at the interface here, really all the controls are on this side. And one of the things I like is at the very top here, this is a zone system scale. So for those of you who are old enough to remember the film days or who are familiar with the zone system created by Ansel Adams, this is a scale of the zone system. So I really like having this in the software. And you can see you can go from zone 0 all the way up to zone 10. See where all my tonalities are in my black and white image. Now, working with black and white images is maybe a little bit different from if you haven't done that much and are primarily working color. In black and white images, you really want some areas that are just pure black and pure white because that just gives it the most dynamic range and the most vibrant contrast. I mean, obviously, there's exceptions to every rule like that, but in general, you want to make sure you have each end of that spectrum. So this zone system scale for me really helps me out with that. So you can see if I click on the 0 zone here, you can see where it is highlighted in those shadows. Now, as I begin working with these tones here, you'll be able to see how that changes. So let's go ahead and click on number 10 here as well. I've got just a tiny bit. There's a few little lines that appeared in the snow. Now watch as I click off of 10, those disappear. So mostly I've got in 9s and 8s. So you see all that cross hatching in there, that's zones 8, 9, and 10. So that's my highlights in there. And also as well up in the sky, which is great. I want some nice bright highlights in there. So I'm going to leave 9 and 10 selected here for the moment. And then this first set of adjustments is really brightness adjustments. So you can begin to really adjust the look of the image here. So I'm going to go ahead. The overall brightness looks pretty good to me, but I'm going to go ahead and bump up my highlights just a little bit and see how those bright areas begin to expand just a little bit. You can see the effect up here, especially in the sky. So I'm going to go about there with my highlights. Midtones, I'm actually going to drop down just a tiny bit. So go somewhere, well, let's see, let's go somewhere down in here. And just targeting down kind of that overall. And if, you know, as always with the software, if you're not sure what the sliders do, just really take them to an extreme and just see what they do. So I've worked with this, so I'm doing a little more minute adjustments, but if in your learning you're unfamiliar, just try moving the sliders. Just really move them a lot and find out for yourself visually what they do. Similarly here with the shadows. Now notice how that shadow area, that black area begins to grow as I do that. I don't want that to get too big, but I'm still going to deepen up those shadows just a little bit on this. So I'm going to go about somewhere in there. And now if I click off of that, you can see how it's starting to take shape. Not quite where I want it yet, but these controls here are a really nice set of controls. Dynamic brightness, you can see as I move this slider, watch the histogram. You can see where the tonalities move towards the white or move towards the black. I don't tend to use dynamic brightness a lot with my images, but it is a very powerful tool, and certainly, you know, every image is different. So sometimes I do use it a bit. It just depends. Each image has got its own unique set of needs, and that's part of what I love about black and white in the digital age here. You really have so many fine-tuning type of controls and so much you can do with an image. It's just great to tailor that with each individual scene, and it's really part of the craft of it. So let's scroll on down here. The next set of adjustments is contrast adjustments. I'm going to leave the overall contrast alone on this. You know, this would be something you could do to really overall globally affect the contrast, which could be effective for some images. But I really want to go in and amplify the whites. Now I'm going to turn these tone warnings on back on for the highlights, and you can see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and amplify the whites. So it has some effect on the sky, but the biggest effect you really see is it opening up the shadows, bringing out some of that detail down in there, which is really kind of counterintuitive. Even though it's amplify whites, you're really, to my eye, I get much more effect down here. But now I can begin to kind of balance that back out and also amplify the blacks. Now watch what happens in the sky as I do that. This is part of what I really love. You can really begin to dial down the tonality in the sky and get some of the subtle differences in the tonality in the clouds up there. So I'm gonna have the amplify blacks about right there. Now the soft contrast is a nice setting as well, so you can kind of give your image, if you slide it to the left, obviously you get a much more HDR type of look, or slide it to the right, you get a much more soft contrast kind of look. On this particular image, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to click off these again so we can see where we're at. All right, starting to come together, starting to become really nice. So the next set of tools is ones that I think are really part of what makes the Silver Efex Pro. It's just part of the magic of the software. And these are the set of adjustments that I use a lot in my images. And it's really just setting the fine-tuning contrast adjustments within the image. So structure, that might be similar to clarity in Lightroom. I'm going to dial that up. I don't want to go too far with that. I want to stick about right down in here. And maybe just a little less, so somewhere right down in there. And then over here on my left-hand side, you can see I have the history state, which is a very familiar thing for those of you who use Lightroom. So I can click back here and just see what some of those adjustments look like. What happened as so I'll step back through time and you can see sort of what I've been doing here with this image. So this is where I'm at now. There's the original image. Is back here at initial state. Actually, you click on, there we go, neutral. So there's neutral. There's where I am at here. Or DxO also likes to include the compare slider. So if I hit that, you can see where I started. And this is where I'm at now. So that can kind of be a nice way to see your progress, or the before and after, above and below. So moving on down with the different adjustments. So let's go ahead and do a little highlight structure as well. And this one I find just really helps to get that fine detail in the clouds and the snow. It really starts to help create that magic down here where the sun is hitting that bright snow down there. So let's slide this thing up quite a ways. I think I'm going to go all the way or nearly all the way with that one. And you see how it really began to, I'll back off just a touch. And it really begins to, you see it up here in the clouds, how those come much more sharply into view. And then also just subtly down in the snow. So that's part of what I'm wanting to bring out. And also part of what I'm wanting to bring out in this image is I just had a little bit of natural spotlighting as the sun was coming through the clouds, and you can see where the rocks are have a nice highlight across them here. So that's part of what I'm wanting to bring out as well. So let's move on down to midtones. Let's crank those up just a touch, and you can see what that slider does. And I'm going to go up just a little bit. I'm going to go somewhere around in that range. Maybe just to back it off a hair. All right, and let's see. Let's go shadows. Let's bring that up a bit as well. And you can see it just begins to create a nice contrast down here. You'll see it especially right down here in the shadow area where you have this delicate snow in there in the shadowed part of this rock. And you can really get kind of a nice little bit of detail in there. I don't want to go too far with that, but you can see it's a subtle effect, but it's really pretty nice. So I'm gonna go up into here somewhere about like that. Blacks, let's see, and that will begin to increase the contrast in the very darkest regions. I don't want to change this much. You can see where if you go too far with this, it's a pretty heavy-handed effect. So I'm just going to bump those up maybe just a touch. Fine structure is another nice little contrast. This is a very, very subtle effect. In fact, you really have a hard time seeing it. Let's zoom in 1-to-1 and just see if we can even really see that at work or not. You have to really kind of zoom in to begin to see that one. So I might just do a tiny bit of fine structure. So the zoom in controls are all up here in the upper right, obviously. All right, so let's stay about in there. Let's see. Then as I scroll on down, so you have tonality protection. So that will also help kind of dial back some of those settings in certain areas. So I think I'm gonna, let's just see what happens as I dial it back a touch in highlights. And I get just a little, you can see it just, what I like to do, just move the slider a lot and see what effect I'm getting, and then I just kind of fine tune it in a little bit. I'm gonna go about in there with my tonality protection with that. Similar to shadows, you can kind of see what that does. I think I'm gonna leave that alone. I really like the way these shadows are starting to come into view here, especially like along this area of the rocks and in here. Just really getting some nice stuff. All right, so moving on down. So control points, I'm not going to mess with that in this particular image. This is a whole nother set of tools that Silver Efex Pro and a lot of the Nick plugins have that really allow you to selectively control in certain areas of the image. So with this particular image, I'm not really seeing areas I want to do that with. So I will go over that in another video, how to use these control points. You could add a color filter if you want. So this will simulate if you had shot the image with a red filter on the lens or a green filter or blue. I'm going to leave that neutral here. Film types, for those who are film aficionados, the software can mimic the look of all kinds of different films. I mean, you got Agfa Pro, Ilford Delta, really pretty amazing. You can see the tone curves down here that start, basically that's what it's doing, is giving you a tone curve and grain structure that mimics that film. I'm going to leave this one neutral. I like, for my images, for the most part, I like more of the pure digital look. I'm not really going for a film effect. But if it's something you're interested in, I think it's a pretty powerful tool and pretty cool. I can really see the usage like in fashion, maybe photographing, antiquities, old cars, stuff like that. You could really make some fun use of this. For myself, though, in my work, I don't tend to do it all that often, but the controls are right there. And then you can control how much grain per pixel shows up. With it in neutral, that's not going to be there. Now, if I were to select a film type, we'll say get something with a little bit of grain to it. Let's see, let's scroll down to like a 400 speed film. You can really start to see where you can get some really chunky grain in there. So it can be a really cool effect. Again, I'm going to stick with the neutral, which zeroes all that out, although I still have my tone curve, which I really love. And you can also select the sensitivity to each one of the color spectrum. So that is a pretty cool effect as well. So if I wanted to lighten up those red rocks just a little bit or darken them down, that's a place I can do that. Same thing with the blue sky. Maybe I'll darken my blue sky just a tiny bit. And you can see it starts affecting down in the trees and that area as well. Actually, I'm going to leave it on this one. But you can see how powerful those effects are. So just other ways to affect the tonality in your images. So you'll tend with the software like this to find a working system work the best for you. So some of these tools I don't use as much, but I encourage you to dive into the software, try it out, and see what works well for you. All right, moving on down here. Then the finishing adjustments. This is another area that I find really powerful and nice with this software. So this is mimicking some of the toning that we used to be able to do in the traditional darkroom. And I particularly like, especially for winter images, I like the selenium toning. I think it's a very good reproduction of what we used to get in the traditional darkroom. And you can select different ones here. You can do a blue tone, cyanotype, coffee toning, so more of a warm tone. You've got a whole selection of things. For this image though, I'm going to use just this first selenium tone. You can dial up and down the strength here. All kinds of controls with that. The other thing I want to do with this image is just a tiny bit of vignetting. Now this is a little bit different look to the vignetting than Lightroom has. And I like just the lens fall off. It's just a nice subtle, you can see how the edges start to darken down just a tiny bit. And I like to use vignetting in my images. I talked about that in an earlier video. And I like Silver Efex lens fall off effects here, but I'm just going to go with this first one here. I'm going to leave this setting -10 is how much it's darkening there. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to leave all that. So I'm pretty happy with this. This is looking pretty nice. Now, one of the effects that you get, obviously, when you mess with some of the tonalities, it'll start bringing out where you got spots. And there's a spot that I didn't see in Lightroom, and actually I got a little light spot up here. So a couple things to clean up in Lightroom. I just want to acknowledge that. But I will do that in Lightroom afterwards. So I hit apply. And it'll take it just a moment here. And this will open back up in Lightroom. So, and there is the image in Lightroom. So now you can see it's pretty close to what I'd done before, slightly different. And that's part of the beauty of black and white. You know, I could go in and mess with this image and it's going to be just a little bit different every time. Subtle changes in the way I do the tonal controls will create a different image. And that's part of what I really like about it. But so here we are with the image I just finished. That's what I had shown you before. So you can see very, very close. Tiny bit darker in the sky on this one. And so, like I said, I will take this back in to develop in Lightroom, take care of a couple of those little lens spots that showed up as I messed with the tonality in there. I can see a couple little white spots in there. Get this one in here. Okay, so that's it. That's the Silver Efex Pro plugin from DxO. It's part of the Nik collection, so you can go to their website. I've got a link down at the bottom. Go check it out. You can download a free trial version for yourself and give it a try. Try it on one of your own images and just experiment. Try the different sliders and see what you get. I would love to hear about what you think about that software or what you think about this video. So be sure to leave me comments down below. As always, like and subscribe. It really helps me build this channel and I really appreciate it. So like I said, try it out and I'll see you around next time. If you're interested in learning more about photography, be sure to head on over to my website, CaseyChinPhotography.com, and look under the Workshops tab. I've got links for online workshops, intermediate and advanced workshops, in-person workshops, and also a workshop interest questionnaire. Let me know what you're interested in learning more about. And when you enroll in one of my workshops, you'll also have access to my Facebook group, Casey Chin Photography Workshops. This Facebook group is designed for participants in my workshops. It's a place where you can share your images, get feedback from myself and others, and build community with other people who are passionate about and interested in photography.